Welcome, everybody, to the Gate Expectations podcast, where I bring in a weekly guest, talk all things Yu-Gi-Oh!, and get to know a little more about each person I talk to. This is the only Yu that is run by a full-fledged journalist such as myself. This is episode 7. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can check out earlier podcasts with guests like Pen God Stephen Trifanowski, Jesse Condon, and Team Samurai X1, and several others. My guest for this week is a big Yu-Gi tuber with over 134,000 subscribers. He's a columnist for TCGPlayer.com and self-proclaimed last remaining Altergeist player, according to his Twitter. It's Doug Zeeff. Doug, thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's cool to be here.
Absolutely, man. And, you've got a pretty extensive resume, not just in the playing field, but, in doing a whole lot of other things. There's a lot to unpack with you, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely. So to begin off with all of this, like you've got a big YouTube channel first of 134,000 subscribers. Pretty big. What do you do on it?
I really enjoy looking at Yu-Gi-Oh's history. I think that there's nothing wrong with like current discussions and stuff, but I think what really interests me is how to look at the past, how to look at what actually happened. I've used this example a lot, but Pot of Desires is like a cool card where I can make discussions talking about how the banishing top 10 cards of your deck doesn't really matter that much. And we know this because there's been so much data that like shows it's been really popular, especially before Ash Blossom came out when a lot of people were debating it. So I enjoy talking about, instead of making so many like predictions about cards, even though I do occasionally do that, but I really enjoy looking at things that have already happened and then sort of analyze why they happened and how they happened and what it could mean for like future instances of cards like that. I think one of the times where I made like an actual prediction was like Witch's Strike. I made a video about that not being good, but even that one I was like a little nervous about being wrong about. I remember because I made the video, I recorded it, I think right before Savage Strike came out, but I actually waited until after the weekend of YCS Chicago, which was the first weekend that set was legal, just in case I was very wrong about it. But it's been a year and a half and the card hasn't seen play. So I just enjoy looking at like what concretely happened, like the actual data points for what cards were successful, and then talk about why they were or were not successful, as the case may be.
I know you graduated from college, I think 2 years ago. Do you have like a history major or anything like that, or anything that kind of relates to?
No, I have an English and communication degree. Yeah, I know the two most employable majors there. But no, I think I use both of those pretty much in my daily life here, communication especially. But English, I think it's very important, especially because I do occasionally delve in the article writing, as you mentioned. I get a good kick out of that. I wish I could write more articles, but a lot of times the article ideas can just be videos, so I just do that. Yeah. But I've really been trying to make a point of it the last couple of months to at least try to write like 1 or 2 articles a month, and it's been a lot of fun.
Don't worry about having like a quote unquote useless degree, because like I did a double major in journalism and philosophy, so like the philosophy is probably not going to get me anywhere unless I go into law. So don't you worry your head about that.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it too much. I have a lot of friends obviously that were in those majors and they seem to be doing pretty well. But people joke about it when I say that in like live streams and stuff when they ask about my degree. But no, like I think for sure like I use those in like my daily life for this particular work. And a lot of the other big YouTubers, Yu-Gi-Tubers specifically, actually also have college degrees that are sometimes related to Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, or at least indirectly, which is always cool.
Well, I want to divulge more into that because I've seen you've been writing since 2012, at least for TCG.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm going to assume that you didn't go to school for 8 years.
Right. No, I've and even before that actually, but it's on like a lost TCGPlayer website that doesn't exist anymore. TCGPlayer used to have this thing that was anyone could write like blog posts and stuff, and I remember doing that. And like in, I don't know, 7th or 8th grade, so they must have been pretty bad. But I remember doing that, and that site closed. Before the site closed, one of the things that they would do is that like once a week they would pick like the best article from like everyone's submissions and put it on like what we now know is like the main TCGPlayer site with like the real writers and stuff. And I remember like one of my articles got chosen for there, and that was like huge because like we got to submit our little pictures, and like they had, I mean, people actually read that instead of just like other bloggers reading it. And that was like what really got me inspired to keep writing. But then they closed that site, so they took two of us, my friend Kelly and I, and then they put us as main article writers for the main site. And we're both still on TCGPlayer to this day, over 10 years later. It's crazy.
Have you seen an evolution in your writing since before you went for your English and communications degree up until now that you finally have it within like the past 2 years?
Yeah, and I think that it's weird because I took a pretty long break from writing for TCGPlayer. I didn't write an article for like a year and a half. That was when my YouTube channel was like first really blowing up. So like most of 2019, I did not write that many articles, and like half of 2018. But yeah, I mean, I think going back to it, when I had taken that long break, I was like messaging my editor, and I was like, okay, hopefully this isn't too rough and stuff. But then he said it was still really good. He said he was surprised at how well I had transitioned into writing again. But I think for me, I look at all my videos as just like, I mean, as pretentious as it may sound, as video essay type videos, at least. So I think that it does come naturally to me to just translate that into writing something instead of talking about it. I think I've noticed that. And I think that it's easy to see. I know that Paul from Team APS, he's been doing some articles as well, and they're really, really good. And I think it's for the same reason. I think when you spend the time making discussion videos, I think it does translate pretty well into. And I think that, so, I mean, throughout writing so many essays for school and then also making videos in a similar style, I think that my writing's got a lot better over the years. If I go back, and I've done this on stream before, but if I go back and look at some of my earlier stuff when I was first, like I know the very first article I ever wrote for TCGPlayer, I think I used like the word, gosh, what was it? I think I used the word deck like four times in 2 sentences. And I like, before I knew how to diversify like what the words were and stuff, because now I say like theme or strategy or archetype or whatever, something else, just to not have the same word over and over again. I mean, there's plenty of other problems with those older articles as well, but yeah, that was definitely something where when I look back and read like even the first year or two of articles, they're
so
pretty
a couple
rough.
things to unpack and all of that. Number one, you know, as you mentioned, like you said deck 4 times. That's like journalism in English 101. You do not mention like the same word multiple times in the same sentence as possible. You definitely don't want to do that. And then number 2 to unpack, like I can completely relate to you in the sense of like just seeing the evolution within yourself after like you graduated and then going back to writing, because like I started YouTubing I think about 10 years ago. I stopped within like the last 6 years. I tried to do like 1 episode of a podcast, wasn't the greatest thing ever. So after I graduated from college, I came back and looked at myself. I'm like, man, I could run a podcast now that I'm fully trained in it. I can see myself kind of evolve and get better and better as we go along every episode. And I'm sure that's kind of been the same experience for you ever since you came back to writing after your graduation.
Yeah, and I think what you say with YouTube is as true as well. I think a lot of people, when they first start a YouTube channel, think that, oh, my videos have to be perfect and stuff. But you can ask any big YouTuber, whatever, their first videos, like maybe even hundreds of first videos, were really, really bad. And they know it. Like, they're happy to talk about it. A lot of big channels, I know that... I don't know, like I know Farfa's done this. I know Nim has done this. Well, I think John has done this as well. And also like I've done it on some like really old stuff, but a lot of us will just hide many of the like first videos on the channel just so they're not out there, because like, I mean, it still happens. Like, and I've thought about it, but I have like a lot of old videos from, I don't know, like about the time that I was first writing articles and stuff like that. And I'll get comments on them like today from like 6 years ago that say like, wow, this audio quality is really bad. And what is this thumbnail? What is this title? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I had like 1,000 subscribers when I made that. So I don't know what you expect out of me. But a lot of times when people click on something, even if it's just a couple years old, which is a long time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, there's a lot of changes in just a couple years. But pretty much people seem to think that when they click something, it's when it was uploaded instead of looking at the date, which is, I think to me is kind of weird, because one of the first things I look at when I open a video is when it was uploaded, because so much can change even just in a couple months for like Yu-Gi-Oh and card games especially.
Yeah, and not only that, but we've seen like a technological change too within the past decade. Like if you look back to 2012, not everybody was able to afford or own a smartphone then, so we had to use like digital cameras because that was one of the in things then to record videos. But now that we've all got smartphones, it's a lot easier to be able to like record video now. Production just gets a lot easier. I don't know if that's been your case or your experience, but it certainly has been for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's like one of the cool things. I always get messages from people that are looking to start a channel and say, well, what equipment do I like really need? And it's like, you have it. It's your cell phone. Like I am unashamed to say that I record. I mean, I don't really do a lot of like videos besides pack openings and deck profiles, but those are all done with my cell phone. I bought a camera. I was not super impressed with it. It was a fairly nice camera, so I returned it, and then I just didn't pick one up again. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's the lighting, who really knows? But honestly, like an iPhone or any of the Galaxies, I mean, those are all perfectly acceptable recording devices for most Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Obviously, you see people go above and beyond when you get to the bigger level, like Nim and Ruggles, and obviously Team APS. All have really nice cameras, as do Sam and Simo and stuff like that. But in general, like I think it's really cool having access to smartphones instead of like people having to go out and buy hundreds of dollars worth of like camcorder equipment and stuff like that. So I think that cell phones are actually really important for the growth of smaller channels, because it means that you don't have to spend any extra money to actually start producing videos.
I definitely agree with you on that part, because just about half a year ago, I'd say I just got myself the iPhone 11 Pro, because I was set to go on a couple business trips for my sports journalism. I was supposed to cover a couple big events, and I wanted to use like the camera on this to be able to take pictures. So I can absolutely relate to you on that end, that I just investing in a really good smartphone, and you have so much at your disposal to be able to make whatever YouTube channel you want. I mean, right now I'm using my phone for this podcast as we speak.
Yeah, there you go. See, no, phones are amazing. Phones are definitely really helpful in this, like, I don't know what wave of Yu-Gi-Tubers we're in. I think we've passed like the second wave, because I think of like the original like Yu-Gi-Tubers, like way back in the day, the greats that like started it all, that were mostly just doing like either event deck profiles or like news with like poor webcams and stuff. And it's come a long way since then. But I think we're in like the third wave right now of like Yu-Gi-Tubing. Like anyone can do it. You don't really need to have any equipment. Like you already have Yu-Gi-Oh cards and you have that's all you really need. I mean, House of Champs always tells people, and I think it's true, that like personality is like the main thing that will sell a channel, will get people interested. The rest of the stuff comes later. Like you don't need nice equipment. You don't need an expensive microphone or expensive computer. You can just do whatever. I mean, I got to like 6,000 subscribers using Windows Movie Maker to talk about stuff, like, which, I mean, that was a disaster, but at least it got there. It's more about your info, it's more about your personality than the equipment that you have.
I'm glad you said Windows Movie Maker, because that's what I used to make all my videos way back when I started YouTubing, because I didn't really want to buy any other software. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, dude, it's a classic.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that, and knowing that I wasn't the only one who tried to make it big going with the Windows Movie Maker.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I used to make my thumbnails in Windows Movie Maker, which I know you're thinking, wait a second, how do you make thumbnails in Windows Movie Maker? But I would put like the image of whatever I was talking about, and then I would use the titling in the program to put like the title across the image, and then I'd like screenshot that and upload it. So there's a bunch of videos for mine for like years, literal years, where every single thumbnail has black bars either on the top or bottom, because like I was always just eyeballing it for like the picture for the thumbnail, and it's like, man, I should go back and change those, or I should just delete those videos. But it was funny. I got a lot of mileage out of good old Movie
me
Maker.
too. Although I'm gonna say that I'm not using it now. Thankfully, I actually actually invested like legitimate money into like Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop so now that everything I'm putting out is actually on like a real good editing software rather than like the ghetto Windows Movie Maker. But that'll always have a place in my heart, at least.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thankfully, smartphones have been taking over, and they've been just a wonder horse for at least anyone who wants to get into like the podcasting or like YouTube business. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps give pretty much anyone a voice. Like if you have stuff you want to talk about, you can.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
absolutely that. And I'm totally on board with you on that one. So, man, looking at your YouTube channel even more, man. I mean, you put out so much content in such a short span of time. So, is this like your main like primary source of income now? Is just being on YouTube?
Yeah, it has been for a while. I started taking YouTubing seriously, I guess, in 2017. John Moore, House of Champs, had messaged me a couple times, and he said that I should consider like trying more because at that point I've been posting like once
Yep.
every couple of weeks, just sort of like a hobby thing. I didn't even have monetized videos, and so I started posting videos like every single day in February, maybe late January, like around February, I started posting videos every single day. And I got Photoshop for the first time. A lot of those old thumbnails are pretty
Yeah.
bad, but they're fun. And so I posted like every single day because my channel was already like, it already like I could monetize my channel. Like it already
Yeah.
met those requirements because I think at that point, like 5,000 subscribers or something. So I can monetize it right away. Not that I was making hardly any money. Who really cares? But so I was spending like a lot of time. I was working a part-time job. I was going to school and I was every single day uploading videos on like the worst laptop in the world. Basically, it took forever. I remember it would take like over an hour to render a 10-minute video that had no moving parts, which is just like oh man. But yeah, so it was a grind. But then so I did that for like several months, making very little money, but my channel was seeing growth, and that was cool. And I made a lot of more controversial videos back then. I still get comments on them because I mean, when you're a small channel, you got to do like, I mean, every small channel knows this, but you have to do something to stand out. You either have to like have like a really big personality, which I don't really have, especially back then. I was not as confident in speaking to a microphone. So I just went with, controversial opinions, which I think a lot of new tubers tend to do as well. But I mean, it kind of works. And but yeah, a lot of those videos, like, get comments and people are like, this take is really weird. And it's like, yeah, it sure is. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, and then I did that for several months through October. So that's February through October, where I'm just doing it every single day and a part-time job and personal relationships and college and all that stuff. And then in October of 2017, well, I guess September, but I had decided, I had looked at my finances and said, I'm making not enough for a full-time job, but I am making significantly more than my part-time job, which means that I should be able to quit that. So in October 1st, 2017, quit my part-time job. And, I basically told myself, it's October, I'm graduating in May of next year. If it doesn't pick up by then, I'll just quit or not actually do it as my full-time job. I'll have a college degree. I can just go do something else. And well, at least I guess that's the idea, at least. I'm not sure if that would have happened, but by the time that May had rolled around, I was doing pretty well. I think that February, if I remember correctly, was the Why Nobody Plays the Egyptian God card video, which was like huge. And then a couple months later, there was the Why Pot Agreed is Banned video, which is still like the best a video has ever done in like a 2-day period. That one went like, I don't even know. I think it got 500,000 views by the end of the first week, which has never happened. Like even the Egyptian God card video, that one took a while to grow, and it grew over time. But the Pot Agreed one, that thing must have just got picked up by the algorithm, because that was the most amount of views I've ever seen in like a 1-week span for me, and it probably will be. I don't think that'll ever happen again. But so I was doing pretty good by the time that graduation happened. So I said, okay, I'll keep doing this just to see like if it'll work. And I think that a lot of people had done that. I know that Simo has talked about in the past that, he had been doing it during college, and then he graduated and said, I think I'm going to do this full time. And I think that's the way to do it. I don't think the way to do it is to like, when you get out of college, if you're not making enough money to actually have it sustain you, to just say, I'm going to go for it. I mean, I guess if you want to do that, you can, but I think most of the big tubers that after college continued to make YouTube videos full time were already in a position where it was making as much as like a full-time job that they would be taking if they were doing something else. So that was, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, but 2 years and a couple months ago. And it's been going.
Well, you see that since. A lot of YouTubers and just it's just yourself and like Simo, like Triff and Sam, there's some sort of like big hook or persona that they have behind their channels. Like you see like Sam and you see Triff, they've got these like huge like outgoing personalities, like mainly positive. Like they're kind of, and like Triff's a little bit more louder than Sam. Sam's a little bit more emotional his, but still relatively positive. Where you've got the more like the historic sense of it and some controversial opinions, and then Simo is just kind of like the way he presents himself in front of the camera is just his tone of voice. Like everyone's got their own little hook. And then mine, for instance, is like I'm trying to bring like a Yu-Gi-Oh podcast, which is done by like a real journalist. Like I graduated from journalism school and like I'm doing this legitimately. And I'm trying to put like a journalistic standpoint on Yu-Gi-Oh, which is my kind of hook. So like, would you say that you've got another kind of hook for your YouTube channel at all?
No, I think you pretty much got it. I think that for every single person, I mean, this always happens on like those Reddit threads where it's like, oh, what's your least and most favorite YouTubers, which usually turns into like who your least favorite ones are. But for every single comment out there that says like X person is too loud or Y person is too annoying, there's another comment that says like I'm too not loud, I'm too quiet, stuff like that. So I think that the beauty of YouTube just in general, but also YouTubing, is that no matter what type of video you're trying to find, someone is probably making what you're looking for. And not everyone has to like every single channel. Actually, it shouldn't be that way. Not everyone should like every single channel. You have your own information you want. Maybe you're more casual, maybe you're more competitive, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe it's more about budget, maybe it's more about presentation, maybe it's more about you like deck profiles, or you like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro replays, or you don't like those things. And I think that that's what a lot of people might miss. I've posted about this before, but I feel like there's a lot of people that think that just because they don't like something means that something is bad, which I always thought was a weird take, because I don't know, if someone's like, I mean, Sam gets like a lot of hate, which is really sad. He's such a good guy. I think he posts good content, but you'll see so many comments that are like, man, this guy's just like the worst YouTuber. And it's like, he's getting crazy views. He's getting lots of interaction. He has 300,000 subscribers as of yesterday, which is really exciting. Sent him a couple texts, but it's like, just because you don't like him doesn't mean that he's a bad YouTuber. He's huge, and he has so many fans, and he really does put his heart and soul into his videos. And I think that's like a really important distinction to make. And I think that when I was just starting out in YouTubing, like seriously, like in 2017, I thought that way as well. I think there were bigger channels that I looked at and said, you know, I don't really think their content is that good. I think I should have as many subs as them. But then you grow a little bit and you realize, oh, it's just different people for different audiences. And that's perfectly fine. Of course, there's a lot of overlap. We're all talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's perfectly fine to enjoy one channel and not enjoy another channel, even if both channels are equally as popular.
I definitely agree with you on that one. I mean, I've had some of my local friends say that they're actually like not into this podcast, or it's not their thing. But then I get, comments from people I barely know that tell me that they love this podcast. They love hearing about it. So, I'm not going to, you can't let definitely like a few naysayers or a few people who just aren't into it, like ruin you, because, the positive eventually is going to outweigh the negative, unless somehow like you're really terrible for some stupid reason.
You have to learn how to really find the constructive criticism in the comment section, which can be really tough because YouTube comments can be all over the place. And I think that is very important, like actually realizing what is constructive. And then the example that I was giving was that I got a lot of comments for a while that my intros were too long. I would like give background information for 2 to 3 minutes. So I really made a point in 2019 and 2020, especially, to try to keep my intros as close to like 1 minute or less as popular. And I think that overall it actually has increased watch time, because people said that they were sick of hearing so much background information every single video. So now I've tried to just jump right into the discussions like a minute into the video and just give as little background information as possible, but like just give the most important information. I think that's been pretty good. But you have to like learn how to separate that from people just saying like, oh, you sound boring. And while I will agree that over time I've gotten better at speaking and some of those early videos were boring, at some point I just accepted like some people out there are always going to think I talk boring, nothing I can do about it, move on. That's not super constructive. And I can look at the views and watch time and stuff and know that enough people are still interested in hearing what I have to say. So I realize that maybe that's not something I have to worry about changing. Not every big YouTuber has to be very loud. Not that there's anything wrong with being loud, but not all YouTubers have to be the exact same person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was thinking that you can't take like one comment too much to heart, because that potential opinion could be just like a fringe comment that maybe not a lot of people share. I mean, you want to go with the majority of it. Take a look at it and see if what the majority is saying is actually true or not. I mean, I'm not going to say that the majority is always right, but
Right.
it usually leans towards something, or at least like there's a pattern being recognized when you look at the majority, though.
That's actually a perfect thing to say, yeah, because one of the things that people can get caught up on, let's say you have a video with 10,000 views and the top comment is, wow, this is the worst video I've ever seen, and only has 100 likes. Well, it's the top comment. That sucks that the top comment is negative, but it only has 100 likes out of the 10,000 people that watched the video. The
Yeah.
vast majority of watchers are going to be silent. They're never going to comment. They're never going to like.
Mm-hmm.
They just watch the video, enjoy the video, and go on with their day. So it's important, although I can't say there's been too many videos of mine where the top comment or the top several comments are all like really negative. I don't think that really happens anymore. Maybe like on the God card video, but even that one, I don't think so. I think the top comments in that one are all jokes and stuff. But I think it's really important to know that like, even if like there is a top comment that is negative, that has a lot of likes, it doesn't reflect the majority of viewers that are watching and enjoying the content. I always think that the best sort of measure for how people are actually feeling about the video is the views, is the like to dislike ratio, is stuff like that. Not so much one top ranked comment, I guess.
Yeah, because you have to watch out for the silent majority, because not everybody who watches videos is going to comment.
Right.
So that's what that's what the views are for, to show that people are actually paying attention to it. So, again, like you gotta have to have a bit of thick skin when you get into this kind of business, because there's going to be some kind of hater, or at least some person who's not going to be quite fond of your content. That's going to happen to everybody.
Yeah, I feel like any channel over, I don't even know when. I think a lot of people say like, I know a lot of people think I don't have a thick skin. I get that a lot. And I think they don't quite realize the degree of comments that YouTubers get. I know that like pretty much all my friends that are above 30K subscribers have had every aspect of their personality, of their physique, all ripped apart by like tons of commenters on a daily basis. That's a lot of interaction that most people aren't getting. And that is just part of the job. We understand that. But I think a lot of people, when they hear, especially like really, really big YouTubers out of the YouTubing scape, talk about negative comments or mental health in this industry, they're just like, well, you're rich, you're making a lot of money, you have a ton of fans, what are you talking about? Not understanding what getting like hundreds of comments, not that any YouTubers getting this, but not understanding getting hundreds or thousands of comments about like your most like thing that you're most afraid about of yourself, like your biggest downfall. But it is important also on the other side of the coin to not get caught in the echo chamber of your own fans. I've noticed this as well, especially with channels that are maybe struggling and they post an update video and say, I don't really know how to improve. And on the update video, all the comments are like, just keep doing what you're doing great, stuff like that. But the views are down. And that kind of goes back to the majority of fans being silent watchers. People aren't going to necessarily comment and tell you what you're doing wrong or what they think you're doing wrong. They're just going to stop watching and they're just going to go watch someone else. And it's really important, if you are trying to take YouTubing seriously as like your real job, to really notice the silent majority of viewers and do what they want, or try to appease them in some way to actually get them to continue watching the videos, because not everyone is going to tell you, hey, I'm unsubscribing because of X, Y, and Z. They're just going to leave.
And it's really hard to be like very transparent with your fan base when you become big, because you can't respond to every single comment that comes out there. Like, I'm sure, like if you listen to like the Joe Rogan podcast or Jordan Peterson's podcast, for example, that they can't respond to every single person. It's huge. And I'm sure that's also kind of the same way with Yu-Gi-Oh!, except maybe to a smaller scale. But even then, like a lot of YouTubers would get like a ton of comments, and it's like it would take all day and like for several days on end just to be able to get back to everybody.
Yeah, I think we had calculated it on one older live stream. We had done like, if I spent 30 seconds responding to every comment, that I would have to work 8 hours every single day to respond to all of them. And it probably wasn't that. It was probably like a minute or something. I'm not sure. But like, yeah, there's no way to keep up. And I think I keep up better than most people would maybe think, because when you look at like your channel comments, it just shows like in chronological order of when they were commented on, not on like which video it was. So people will comment on like 5-year-old videos, and I'll reply, like I'll talk to, like I love having dialogues with commenters. I think that's so much fun, like having an open conversation, especially on more controversial topics. And I think that tons of people, like, they're always surprised, like when I comment on like a 2-year-old video or 1-year-old video, like immediately when they comment. But you know, I think it's really important to know, to try to like get the pulse of like what's going on with people watching videos, even older videos, just to understand where I can improve upon, where I did good, stuff like that.
And I think people want transparency from who they're talking to, because they want to be heard, they want their voices known, and of course they want your product to improve in a sense. I mean, the heart's in the right place, at least I would think so anyhow. And you know, I try to be transparent as much as I possibly can, but you know, I don't always respond to every single Facebook comment that I get on my Facebook, and I'm sure that's probably the same on your end as well, even though that's just Facebook.
Yeah, no, I had to turn off my Facebook fan page messages. I didn't really use that page in a while, but I still got messages, and I just couldn't keep up with them. I really try to keep up with the messages, especially on Twitter now, because Facebook's closed, but it's hard. Like, there's a lot of messages, a lot of requests, a lot of people. I think most people mean well. They just want deck help or advice on certain card choices, but I try to, honestly, like when I see messages, I try to keep track of what they're asking, and then see if enough people ask the same or similar questions. Maybe I can make a video talking about that to answer those without like having to answer every single individual question.
Yeah, and again, just being able to respond to every single person that you can, it's tough enough as it is. So I mean, I'm not trying to like shoot down any of the fans who put a comment in, because they're also greatly appreciated, but just understand that we just can't get to every single one. Well, maybe I can, because I'm still kind of starting out small right now, but at least for the bigger YouTubers and whatnot, it gets tough, and it takes a lot of time out of the day, especially since I'm sure yourself, you have your own personal life that you would like to attend to and deal with as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's one of the reasons that I don't even know what it's called, like loving comments or hearting comments. I think that was like a really good addition by YouTube, because it means that the content creator can highlight a couple messages that they feel that they want the person to know, hey, I saw this. I'm not going to like pin it or anything, but just, hey, I saw this. Hey, I appreciated the efforts, stuff like that. And then other people can see that comment. And I think that's like a really cool addition that they made. Instead of having to reply to like every single comment saying, I saw this, it's pretty cool, you can just throw it a heart and then they know.
Scraping out about 10 seconds per comment makes a big deal when you can just simply heart it. I'm sure it's a lot of time saved when you think about combining everything together.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And speaking of personal life, I found out that you just got engaged this past March.
Congratulations, right before the whole world closed down, pretty much, like 1 week before.
Right, yeah, because I remember it happened like mid-March. That's when I believe Canada and the States started to go into lockdown.
Yep.
And I'm seeing that the March 8th was the day you got engaged.
Yep. Yeah, 1 week later on Monday, everything was closed.
Yeah. But it's also been like a big year for you as well in terms of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, because as I mentioned at the very start of the podcast, you say that you're the only Altergeist player that's left, and we've seen you top 2 big events with Altergeist. When Multifaker was at 1, you were top 4 at the UDS Invitational, and you came top 32 at Portland. So let's run through why you decided to keep going with Altergeist for I think a year, and even while Multifaker was on. I know you made a video about it, but for those who haven't watched it yet, why don't you like run us through your thoughts on running Altergeist in the past year?
Okay, so the reason I picked up Altergeist when Multifaker went to 1 was simple math, because I was playing Salamangreats at the time. I played Salamangreats at a regional, a YCS, and then Nats. Even I played Salamangreats at Nats. Yeah. And like Salamangreats, they lost 2 of their cards. So like they lost 4 cards total. They lost 2 Circle, 2 Gazelle. Altergeist only lost 2 Multifakers. So one deck lost 4 cards, one deck lost 2 cards. I just went with the one that lost 2 cards. Honestly, I was pretty done with Altergeist at that point. I did not think, as I say, every ban list, but I really mean it. Like, I never think I'm going to play that deck again, because it does have so many issues, like all trap decks do. I mean, you can only go second against combo decks so many times before you just want to play something that actually can go second. But I mean, it was fun. Like, and I think that was really important for me. That was my first Premier top. I topped like a couple ARG events, I guess, like the ARG Invitational and an ARG Circuit Series, and I got in like a couple regional tops. But that was like the first big Premier top. Like the UDS is one of the hardest events, one of the longest events, and I think most people know that. I had to play against a lot of people that had been to Worlds or won YCSs, stuff like that. It was a very hard tournament, and I don't know, like I misplayed in top 4, and I think I could have probably won that match if I would have. Well, it wasn't really a misplay. I was playing around like a 1-of in a 60 card deck, but I'll always think about, I think I could have won that match if I just would have played it like a little bit differently, a little bit safer, and I didn't, which kind of sucked. But and I feel like I would have had a good matchup in the finals, but it's okay. I'm over it. But then the next weekend, which was really important to me as well, the next weekend I topped Portland, which was important because when I topped the UDS, I mostly saw like really positive comments, but I saw a couple people saying like, "Oh, it must be a fluke," which does happen, certainly does happen. Yeah. But so I thought it was really important to top Portland and make sure that it wasn't a fluke. And then like a month later, or not a month later, but a little while later, I got second at a Detroit regional after a new ban list. So I really do enjoy Alter. If it's ever a deck that I want to have like the most success with, it's always going to be Altergeist. That was a really special couple months for me.
And there was a lot of buzz around you making it that far with Altergeist because everyone thought that the deck would be dead at
pretty
that
much.
point.
Yeah, it's funny to think about now because like Altergeist ended up getting played like a lot more after that. But yeah, even after the UDS top, like people still thought it was dead. People still thought. I mean, I think I was only Altergeist at the UDS that topped, and I think there were 2 at Portland or 1 other besides me. But like eventually, people figured out it was actually like pretty good, but especially at that time, like people thought it was just completely dead. But one Multifaker, that's fine. That's okay.
Well, what people seem to forget is that when you start to remove some stuff taken out of a deck, like new things can start to come into place. I mean, for example, when you talked with at Indianapolis, like you incorporated Sangan into your deck. Which was completely different now. And then not too much of like when Salamangreats, when Gazelle started going down, then people started running Triple Flame Buffalo. Like it's these inclusions in, like people seem to forget that like other stuff can kind of take its place and even do the job and sometimes even better.
Yeah, and I think that like Orcus is a good example too, where the whole deck was just like Mermaid focused for so long, like format after format after format, and then Mermaid got banned, and it still worked like just fine. Like some might even say that the final variant of Orcus, I mean it's not final, it's still playing, but the final Harp variant of Orcus with Sky Circuit Orcus was like the best, most consistent, most powerful version of Orcus. Maybe it wasn't in comparison to like the very first iteration where Mermaid was at its best and you were like as a thought comboing your opponent and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean the deck continued to be good after like 5 cards got banned. So who would have guessed it?
Yeah, exactly that. Like you incorporate a new like little archetype into it, and not to mention like more cards come out. I mean, I saw more IP Masquerena in the last part of Orcus than I did before like Mermaid came out.
Yeah,
because I think like Topologic Zeraboros was more prevalent then, like and Topologic Bonner was out. Like I just saw a completely different strategy when I ran Orcus like pre and post Mermaid.
Yeah, and now it's like a Union Carrier deck and a Needle Fiber deck. It just adapts so well. The core Orcus cards, like especially the extra deck monsters, are just so strong and so like universally good in so many situations, setting up your board at breaking boards at everything, that it's really hard to truly hit Orcus into the ground. I guess they were kind of struggling before Gearsuit came out, and even now they're kind of a rogue deck, but they're kind of reminding me of like Mermails, where they have such a core lineup of cards that they just seem to be good pretty much no matter what, at least as like a rogue level strategy.
And I found Mermails really, really weird in the sense that like their whole deck philosophy completely changed on a dime. Like before they could be control with combo and OTK capabilities, but now it's started to turn into like a big glass cannon, and it finishes off with like a Biscale to try to negate your spell. It's completely different in the way it plays, and we've kind of seen like the evolution of how like Orcus has been being played all over the place now. And the mirror match, I gotta tell you, is one of the biggest chess matches I've ever had to play.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of interactions going around there, and I like decks like that though. I think that's one of the cool things about Yu-Gi-Oh! Not having set rotation is that you have decks like Mermills, Burning Abyss, Lightsworn, even the random rogue decks, but especially those ones that actually have topped a lot. And you just have them like show up at competitions every once in a while, maybe not every YCS, but like probably every other YCS, every 3 YCSs, that just like takes some players by surprise, and I think that's really cool about not having set rotation, always having access to like all the cards in the game except for the ban list, basically.
Yeah, exactly that you don't have like one set style to play a certain deck. Like you can play a deck with different, like completely different styles, even if they're the same deck. I find it's up to the player and how they decide they want to play that deck. And Burning Abyss, I think, is one of the best examples of that. I don't know how many variants we've seen. We've seen like trapless versions. We've seen Monster Mash versions. We've seen like full trap wave versions of Burning Abyss all over the place. And especially when Lynx came out, they came back again.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. But that's like, I don't know, that's like one of the things that I love about Yu-Gi-Oh so much. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely a unique thing too. And it's kind of funny to get like a hit of nostalgia when you see an old deck kind of get rehashed, but like play completely different from how it was before. Because you think, oh yeah, I know all these effects, but what about the new things that get incorporated into it? I mean, when Burning Abyss was made its newest incarnation, we saw Orbital Highlander come out, like BLS come out, and it got really crazy. And people didn't really care for setting out Beatrice's effect because they usually use this link material for one thing.
No, it's cool. I mean, today's meta is tomorrow's rogue. That's always what I've said.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I like that. You being on this, being on the big circuit lately, you've also been on the other side of the table, and I don't mean judging that. You also did. You did some feature matches for 2 events. You did for the 150th event in Columbus, and then you did YCS Toronto in 2015.
Yeah, I think I had 4. I think I did 2 YCS Torontos and then those 2 as well. Or I'm just trying to, I can't remember because 150th was Columbus. Yeah, I think it was 3 total. I think it was Toronto and then Columbus and then a Toronto. And that was really fun. Like that was like one of the times that I could really stretch my English major legs. That was really cool. I got to work with my editor in person at both the Toronto ones, Jason, who's I've known forever and is such a great guy, such a big friend of mine. And that was like really exciting. A lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, and a lot goes into feature match articles. And I know they don't really do them too much anymore. I guess they still do. Well, I mean, there's no events right now, but they don't. I mean, obviously people want live streams and stuff, but I don't know. I know people really like live streams, and not everyone's a fan of the feature match articles, but I actually really like the feature match articles. I've always read them. It was a big dream of mine to work on feature matches, and that was really fun. I got to meet a lot of nice people at Konami back then that I still talk to today, and I got to make a lot of friends, so it was a cool experience.
Yeah, big shout out to Jason Grabermeyer. Love that, man. And he's also given me a similar experience with you too. So before, when Yu-Gi-Oh and Konami decided to like do all the streaming, and when they wrote feature matches for it, there was a website, you may remember it. It used to be called metagame.com.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and Jason would also write for that too, and he helped me get into that site. I did feature matches for that website as well. And again, a lot of pressure when you do those things, because you have to sometimes kind of slow the game down a little bit. Say, okay, hold on a sec, let me catch up, and let me like get all this down. Yeah, and I'm sure it's a little bit tougher for you because about 8 years ago, maybe Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't as fast, and now we are seeing these first turn boards come up. So you're almost writing like a big little essay just on somebody's first move.
Yeah, I know that one of those events was Shadal's and Burning Abyss. And it's like, think about how much you have to write just when a Shadal fusion is activated, right? So Shadal fusion is activated. It sends 2 different monsters that have graveyard effects. They summon Construct, which sends something which has a graveyard effect. You have to write every single piece of that. And you'll see nowadays, I don't know how often I did it, but it is a good way that you can keep up with that kind of stuff, is that you'll see people when it gets really crazy, they'll just like write, okay, and then a whole bunch of plays happen, and here's what the ending board was. And it's just because you can only ask so many times, hey, can you slow down? Hey, can you announce your plays? That's always the funny part, I remember, is that you would ask people, can you please announce all of your plays like every time you activate a card? And then they'll do that for the first like 5 minutes of the game, and then they just kind of stop, because I mean, people aren't used to playing Yu-Gi-Oh that way, where you're announcing every card name. But it's tough being a feature match writer. It was fun, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is, and I had the same experience too when I was writing for metagame.com. Is that like They would follow for the first 5 minutes. Yeah, it would. And then they'd just forget and they would just go off. And sometimes I'd have to okay, guys, you just slow down just a little bit. Remember just to announce your plays. Because back then you wouldn't really announce your standby phase now. As compared to now.
Yeah, not nearly as many fast effects and stuff like that.
Yeah, everybody's calling their phases. Everybody's doing it now. And I remember I would always used to call battle phase before just to try to bait out threatening roars. Because people know that if you declare an attack and then you activate threatening roar, that attack still goes through. So that's why I started saying battle phase just to make sure are you going to play threatening roar or not? Because if not, I'm going to make the attack, and then people flip threatening roar and think, oh well, that attack shouldn't go through. I'm like, yes, it does. It happens, and now it's started to evolve to every single phase gets called out to make sure that there's no complications or anything like that, or to have a fallback to say, well, I did declare my phases, kind of thing.
Right. Or think of Nibiru. Every single summon you make after the 5th summon, you have to ask, do you have a response? Do you want to do anything? And it's kind of annoying. But it is important to maintain the game state. You don't want to accidentally extra deck summon something and your opponent say, oh, actually I had Nibiru. You want to give them the opportunity. You don't want to just rush through your plays and try to make it so they can't Nibiru you. It's no, you have to make sure that they don't have a response while you're doing plays.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think Gorz, the Emissary of Darkness, was also one of those cards that would prevent people from saying, all right, I'm just treat it like Magic, just have all their monsters attack at once. No, you've got to attack one at a time.
Yeah. No, that was the classic one when you have an open board and you just say, I attack for a game. And it's I think in some cases they ruled it that whoever was getting attacked got to pick the attack order if the other person didn't say it. So you would just be your highest monster attacked first. I'll summon Gorz.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I did it. And I remember at one Canadian Nationals when it happened, they enforced it that way, or said, do not attack all at once, or we'll give you a warning, we'll give you some kind of penalty for it. So I really took that to heart because I didn't want any kind of complications happening. I told my opponents don't attack all at once, please attack one at a time. And even if I didn't have Gorz in my hand, I would tell people, I'm sorry, who attacked first? Just to make people kind of think and maybe get a little paranoid so that they think, okay, maybe I don't want to attack with the next monster. It doesn't work a whole lot, but it's worked at least once. It's worked a couple times.
Yeah, I think it's just important to keep a consistent level of play, to give people opportunities to activate cards and all of that stuff to make sure that before you change phases, your opponent doesn't have a response. I suppose not everyone is this way, but I think that most players don't want to win unfairly in terms of breaking the rules. I think that people like spending the time making sure their deck is good, making sure that they know their combos, and then beating their opponent that way. Even if their combos are unfair, they're not trying to cheat the system and get people and shark them and stuff. I think it's just about keeping a consistent level of play across the board.
And I've been enjoying that kind of evolution that we're seeing from Yu-Gi-Oh! Now that everyone's declaring the phases and making sure that we're getting a fair opportunity to be able to respond to it, because there's so much interaction now with your opponent, even when it's not your turn and even when it's the first turn, because hand traps keep looming. I mean, that was one of my favorite parts of when I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the complete interaction you can have with your opponent with trap cards. I thought trap cards were so awesome when I first heard about Yu-Gi-Oh! Before I even started playing the game. That was a big thing that got me into the game because I thought that was so fun. I love the interaction, unlike Pokemon where you just watch your opponent play their turn, the Pokemon trading card game, and you have to wait till their turn's done, and then you make your move and you just watch, and your opponent just watches you. I love the interaction.
Yeah, no, I play a lot of Hearthstone, and that's always one of the things that gets me is anytime that some degenerate combo is happening that I had literally no way of stopping, I was just thinking, if I just had Effect Veiler, this would all change. It would just be so much better. Obviously, that game is set up differently, but it is kind of weird to think about how much trap cards and hand traps interaction on your opponent's turn, which is something that some players complain about. No one likes their stuff getting negated, but when you play a game that has no possibility for interaction on the opponent's turn, it becomes pretty apparent when they're doing something and it's I feel like I should have a way to stop this other than preemptively stopping it or trying to break it once it happens. I feel like there should be a way to interact with them while they're doing their combo. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's also just a major part of skill development in Duelists. When you get interrupted, when you have to learn how to play through that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. It's like Mike Tyson had a great quote, and he said, everybody has a plan until you get punched. And that's kind of the thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can set up a big board all you want. That's easy. But what happens why when you get interrupted, or what happens for subsequent turns afterwards when you don't have like a great game state in front of you. Like, can you play the grind game afterwards?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, even in combo decks, don't realize how important it is to know what's going to happen on your second turn after you make their big board. Like, even if your opponent doesn't break your board, they're probably going to put up like some cards of their own. They're not just going to pass usually. I mean, sometimes you make a board that's unbreakable and they just pass and you just win the game. But in general, like a lot of times your board gets half broken, or they set up their own board and then you have to deal with the cards. It's pretty important. And I think that's what separates like the great players from just the good players. I think knowing how to play those extra turns, especially in like really high stress situations, is like really, really key to success in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially at like regionals and YCSs and bigger events, which we don't have right now. But when we do have those, a lot of people, the first time that they're like the last person so that's still playing a match, are not ready for like 20 spectators watching them, and they start misplaying. And you just have to learn how to be comfortable with that, because you might not be a named player, but if you're the last people playing in the room, or you're playing against a named player, you might have a lot of spectators. You have to know how to not get too like confused about that, or too like flustered from that happening.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. Like, you're going to have some people surround your table, whether you're highly known or not, because in some way, shape, or form, like if you're, again, as you mentioned, you're the last one, you're playing a big player, or you're on a feature match, you're going to have some kind of spectators around you. Obviously, it's not going to happen every single match, but it can happen at some point, and I've seen people just absolutely break down when that happens. Even in side events as well. Like, you get people watching like the finals of side events. That happens too. And even at locals, you get that as well when you're the last table. So like pressure, being able to overcome pressure, I think is a big factor in this game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. Even at locals, usually the last table that's playing is going to have spectators. Now, you might feel a little bit more comfortable because they're people possibly if you go to the locals often. But still, it's good to know what it's like having people watch you while you play, and being prepared for that when it actually happens. Because if that's happening at like a bigger event, it might mean that that's a really important match that you need to not lose.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to how we said, dealing with like the second turn and whatnot, majority of the time we are seeing games end within like the first 5 turns.
Right.
But it didn't used to be that way, though. Like about a decade ago, like we would get like 10, 15, 20 game turns and whatnot. And I think a lot of the newer players right now, like kind of have that struggle. Like, I'll give you an anecdote. For example, when Yu-Gi-Oh! Days would happen, we would play you'd play structure deck duels.
Right.
You would have those, but those games aren't designed to be done, like have the game done in 2 to 3 turns. You're meant to actually really grind and have a long, drawn-out game. And I see a lot of the players that have trouble being able to grind, like, kind of get exposed, because I see a lot of overextension. I see a lot of people making plays that they shouldn't be doing, and that's kind of something you can kind of do in this format, because it's more of a put everything on the table and see if you can get stopped. But you would get horrifically punished by great players if you did that back in the day at wrong times.
Yeah, and I think that this is what really sets apart people in mirror matches specifically, especially when it's like a deck that can grind forever, like Eldritch. Resource management is everything. When both players have access to almost any card in their deck at any point, like Eldritch do, it's very important to know, okay, what do I do? What am I willing to commit to the board? What do I save for later on? All that stuff is very important. Yeah, usually mirror matches have like certain blowout cards, but I definitely seen some Eldritch mirror matches go into like turn 5, past turn 5, up to turn 10, just because they're grinding so much, especially when people weren't playing like the big combo variants that we see nowadays. And I think that, if everyone was playing the same deck or a variant of the same deck, you want to know what happens when like we're both low on resources. How do you manage what you're actually doing correctly to win the match?
And I find that happens more commonly with mirror matches, because again, like, you kind of know each other's place, and you have to like be able to siphon through everything, and it gets tricky. Like, for example, like I think Necros is one of like the most resource managing like mirror matches in all of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, for sure.
Because every single thing you have to do is all about resources. If you're down behind one card the entire game, you're probably losing. And whoever gets trished that's it. You're out of the game. 9 times out of 10, whoever gets Trish, the game is over.
Yeah, pretty much.
At
That was
that
always the
point,
Necros thing. It was like playing chicken. Like, how many cards can you commit to the board that you have to like break your own board in main phase 2, and then your opponent tries to do the same thing, and you got to make sure they're not OTKing you because now you don't know monsters. You got to make sure you have Valk or a way to play around cards like that. So that was always
fun. Because Necros then had the ability to OTK as well. So I thought that was like one of the most meticulous chess matches in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a tough mirror match, I tell you. Even post Dijin.
Yeah.
Like post Dijin, like it was crazy. And speaking of which, this was probably our first interaction that we ever had with each other. You did one of my feature matches.
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day. I don't know how well you remember that feature match. It was against Joe Bogley. My guess is you picked us because it was more for Joe.
He was playing Cosmos, right?
Yeah, he was playing Cosmos, and not to mention he's a Worlds competitor as well. So I don't take any offense that you didn't pick me because it was me. You picked him for more of his Joe. It's completely understandable.
Is that I don't know if it's still this way, but for the longest time, feature matches we only got the pairings like I don't know a couple seconds, maybe 30 seconds earlier than they went up, and you have to like make the decision in like 2 seconds how to like which person you're featuring so the judge can go grab them before the match starts. So like people will say, well, why didn't you grab this matchup and stuff? It's like, we don't know. I mean, like I said, I wrote feature matches 5 years ago, but at the time we had no idea what the matchups were going to be until basically they were being posted. So like how it would work is you would like watch a couple players that had like more interesting decks and see how they were doing. You would get people that were like, you would say, okay, they're 5-1 right now. We'll check them out if they're going into the next round and they're still like 5-1. Well, then they would be 6-1. Now we'll grab them. And then sometimes they go X2 and it's like, okay, now they're just lost because they're like 100 tables down from where they were. So who really knows? It's hard. I don't know. That's why like a lot of times when there's like a feature match that maybe could have been 2 like named players. I mean, there's always named players playing, but like 2 really big like players. And you ask like, why didn't that happen? It's like, well, you don't know the matchups until like they're happening.
Yeah, exactly that. And when I was doing feature matches with Jason, we'd always have our eyes out on a couple players just to see like how well they're doing. And if they're still doing well and they got like this really interesting deck, then of course we're going to feature them. It's there's so many variables involved in selecting who's going to be part of the feature match. So I completely understand it because I've been on your side of the table as well. And Cosmo at that event was relatively new. I mean, Forerunner was their biggest monster at the time, just to show how big Cosmos were. And I actually found out that when I was playing against Joe, I found out that he was playing Cosmos, so I kind of had an idea. I did play only one other Cosmo player earlier that day, so at least I knew what to do. I actually had no idea what Cosmos did, like going into that day, and lucky enough, I was able to beat both my Cosmo matchups. And yeah, thanks by the way for picking me because it actually made me look good.
Yeah, there you go. No, I think we featured like one. I know Jarrell Winston was playing Cosmo at that event as well. He's playing like a slightly different variant, but I think we featured him as well.
Yeah. Again, like Cosmos with the new deck. So of course, people want to see like new stuff happen on feature matches, or at least on being on the writer's sense. Like I want to feature new decks.
Yeah, you always are trying to feature like whatever is the latest and greatest, because like at the end of the day, especially with like an unproven archetype, it might not top. So that by top 32, you're going to have whatever is the meta matchups. That you're going to have the named players that topped the event. So earlier on, you want to try to get the decks that are maybe a little bit more unproven, just so that that like if they don't do well later in the tournament, you at least had them in the earlier rounds. I think you can even still see that with like current YCSs, especially for like the live stream matches. Like the earlier rounds, I would say rounds 1 and 2 especially, but maybe even round 3 sometimes, you'll see maybe not named players so often, but just like interesting decks, just so that they actually have a chance to get featured, which is fine. Maybe they top. I mean, that would be awesome. I mean, Gren Maju getting second at a YCS and first at a YCS a couple weeks later, that was a huge deal, but they don't always do that. They don't always overperform that much. So you want to make sure that they get featured at least at some point. You're going to have tons of meta matchups on day 2. Day 1, you should focus on fun decks.
Yeah, it is. Or if you're the case of Jeff Jones, you kind of fill both slots because he's usually coming out with both creative decks and also topic as well. So he's been a gem for being able to do feature matches because he fits the bill on both accounts.
Yeah, that's always great when you have a named player who always plays unorthodox like decks. That's always really exciting.
Yeah, and the only special thing about my Necros deck when you featured me was I was playing Gold Sarcophagus, and most other Necros decks weren't playing that card. But I thought that card had a lot of good utility when it was out. I think it was only at one at that point in time, and I only played one anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, it's picking out feature matches can be like a really tough process because you have such a small time frame to be able to get it all together. So for those who were complaining about, like, why did you feature this, as you said before, well, again, you don't have a lot of time to figure it out, and things can change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, and there's so many interesting matchups, like, between players and decks that are happening every single round. You're always bound to miss something cool that happened. I mean, it's just impossible. Like that, like, Yu-Gi-Oh is very diverse. Even when it's like a one deck format, you see weird tech options at every single table usually, but you can only do so many feature matches per round. You can't feature everyone.
Yeah, and I've always found that, like, throughout the start, we always try to feature, like, non-meta decks, like or creative decks that that are variants of meta decks that are around, because we want to draw the reader in first of all, and even all the veterans as well. Like, I'm sure no one wants to read like a mirror match feature match for 10 rounds.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much how it goes. And I think that I don't know, I know they didn't do them forever, but I think they had just started or had for like a little while the feature match request forms when I was writing, and I think that's very helpful, letting people that maybe aren't named players, or I mean named players can submit them too, but letting people that maybe aren't so well known actually like write down, hey, I'm X1 with my Skull Servant deck, and that's really exciting, unless it's round 2 and you're 0-1. But if it's like round 5 or something, it's like, oh, that's really cool, maybe we can feature them, where otherwise that person, other than like someone like one of the writers accidentally hearing about that or seeing them while walking around, they would just have no clue that match was even happening.
Definitely that too. They make for really fun like ways to like be able to type out that feature match too, because you're looking at them like, okay, I got a whole new plethora of cards to work with now, and like, I may not know them all, but it's fun to at least type it down. It's a refreshing change of pace to look at.
Yeah. It's a little challenging sometimes from the perspective of the writer if you're writing about a deck that you've never seen in your entire life, but that is what it is.
Yeah. And I've seen a feature match that was non-meta that come up with a crazy ending. I think it was back on metagame.com. There was a player actually playing Elemental Heroes, and he won because he top decked a Bubble Man, got the 2 cards draw off it, and was able to make Elemental Hero Mariner, which lets you attack directly if you have a set spell.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually do remember that.
Yeah, and you get attacked directly if you have a set spell trap card. So you drew a spell trap card, made Mariner, set it, and attack for a game. And I thought that was one of the greatest feature matches ever to watch.
Yeah,
because of the sheer hilarity of it, of the way that won, and the fact that you're doing like an Elemental Hero deck when that particular deck wasn't really meta.
Right. No, that's always good.
Yeah, and sometimes you just stumble upon that hidden gem of a match that's just so fun, and then all of a sudden, like, they could take it to the top. Like, for instance, when you see Jeff Jones, I think it was one Toronto YCS, he took like Earth. He took Earth Psychics.
Yeah,
to second place. Yeah, only losing to Joshua Graham with windups. But he was running something that no one ever knew of, and he was running Grand Soil in there, and nobody knew how to play against it.
Right.
And it was such a treat to watch that kind of deck go. And then I think a couple Niagara Falls ago, he's playing Firewall Dragon FTK.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was like a crazy thing too, because at that point, no one had ever heard of that deck. I mean, there were 4 people playing that deck at that event. I think so. It had like an insane conversion rate. One of them got second. I think that's what he got. But I mean, that deck after that, people knew about it and people were prepared for it. But I mean, it's kind of stupid because it's an FTK or an OTK or whatever, but it was still pretty exciting just from a deck building standpoint, how many weird cards it played, beginning of the end, all the Dark World cards. And it actually, they turned that into like a competitively viable deck, which was pretty cool
to watch. But you've also been going back to that other side of the table again, you've also been in a couple feature matches yourself during your Altergeist run. Yeah. I mean, especially, I'm not really that important of a player, but I guess I'm sort of a named player by some metrics. So I'm not, they like featuring me when I'm about to, I know I've gotten
a couple day 2 features, which always like you're already nervous about being in day 2 and having to win, and then you get the feature. I think I've won 2 day 2 features and lost one of them. That was a pretty sad loss, but I guess I won both the Altergeist features, so that's what really matters. I think for Portland they had done, I think it was the last round of day 2, so it was like whoever wins this match tops, and I believe that they had featured me for that, and that was like super nerve-wracking. I think that was against Sky Strikers, but man, that was just it adds so much pressure. It adds a lot of pressure, and especially when I'm playing in feature matches, I'm trying to like play in a way that makes sense for the writer, because I know it's hard, so I'm maybe not as like focused on playing correctly, but it's a lot of stuff.
I hope I was playing at a really good pace for you when I was playing against Joe Bogley in my feature match, because again, I've been on both sides of the table, so I was trying to declare everything for you so that way you would hear it and make sure that I was playing at like a reasonable pace for you to be able to type down everything, because I know how tough it gets to be able to type so much and then kind of lose it. And I'm like, okay, hold on, what just happened for a second?
I'm sure you were. I'm sure it was
years ago though. So again, like you've done enough that maybe you just don't remember everything. I know that I don't remember every single feature match that I've written down. So it's every experience is different for sure. But at the same time, I love being in feature matches. I don't know about you, but like, what's your experience? What's your take on them?
I think it's fun. It is just like, I think it makes me think about the match in a different way, because, which sometimes can be wrong, but I feel like people are pressured to make plays knowing that thousands of people are going to read those plays later on. So you like kind of double think about all the things that you're doing. Just like, is this going to look weird in the article? And I think it's been a couple of cases where I've like made a play that I thought was wrong, but that people reading would think was right, which definitely is not what you should do. But I mean, you just feel like obligated to try to make plays that people aren't going to make fun of later on,
you could also argue the other way. Maybe some people get a little bit more laser focused because they understand. Because if you've been a feature match veteran, like you understand that they want you to declare your praise. Like you're forced to take it slow. So in that sense, it's like, for instance, like a really good player may be playing against like a not so good player. They may not take them as seriously. They might not try as hard. But when they know they're going against like a really quality player, then they could like zero in and have like laser focus on them and like maybe bring out the best. But then again, it can also go either way as well. Some people can choke under that kind of thing. It's really by a case by case measure. But that's just how I am when I get my feature matches, or at least when I'm under pressure.
Yeah, and I would say that I haven't had a video feature match yet. I never got a chance to do one of those. So that might actually be better, because then you're not like, you don't have to like play differently. I mean, you have to show when you draw cards or search cards, you have to show the judge so that they can input it into the iPads that they have or whatever. But in general, like that might be like the superior way from a player's perspective, because you're not so focused on like announcing every card name to your opponent, because they can just see it and you don't have to say it for the article writer. So that might actually be better.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe one day I'll
get
get
one of those either, and I'm hoping someday I can. But I haven't been performing as well on the bigger circuit as of late, so I can understand why I'm not getting picked yet. Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon.
Well, there's no events right now, so maybe when it comes back.
Speaking of which, like, how have you been going for Yu-Gi-Oh! Like through this pandemic?
It's tough. I've done some online locals. I did some online tournaments. Honestly, though, like playing online with simulators is just not the same to me for some reason. Like I made a video with my friend that was a Konami sponsored video for remote dueling, where it was like my Lightsworn deck versus his Thunder Dragon deck, and that was honestly like some of the most fun that I've had with Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last like 3 months. Just like building the deck and playing with the physical cards just felt so different, and I don't know why that is. But yeah, I can't play for extended periods of time on simulators. And maybe it's because I enjoy the interpersonal part of Yu-Gi-Oh so much, meeting new people, playing against people at events. I always have such a fun time playing against people. And I always try to make sure that both players, no matter who wins or loses, like have a good time in the match. If I win, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I sacked you with the floodgate or whatever. And if they win, it's, oh, have a good time. I think everyone gets caught up in the moment, but in general, I think that most people that have played me at events know that I like just kind of having a good time, even when I am like trying to top the event. I mean, you're always trying to top the event, but I think it's just more important than anything that just have fun when you're playing. I know that sounds silly from the meta sheep dzeeff or whatever, but I think just having a good time when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh is really important. And there's a time and a place. Obviously, when I'm in like the top cut of an event, I'm not going to take it, or I'm going to take it a little bit more seriously. I'm not going to take it as like jokingly. I'm not just going to joke around my opponents as much. But even in top cut, I think having some good banter with your opponent and building a rapport is always going to be like one of the best parts about Yu-Gi-Oh for me. I've made so many of my best friends from
absolutely,
playing
and I
Yu-Gi-Oh,
agree with you
cool.
wholeheartedly on that, because I'm very extroverted myself, so I love interacting with people. I love talking to them. I'm like Daniel Negreanu of like poker. I like to talk with my opponent. I like to have some fun with them, even outside of the game, even though we're playing a game. I still like to have fun with them. And then I've made so many friends just playing this game, and thankfully I did, because those friends would be my road trip buddies for YCSs, or back then like Shonen Jump Championships. So if I hadn't have talked to these kind of people and like be friends with them, like I wouldn't have gone to as many events as I was able to beforehand. So I definitely think that's a big thing too.
And you have to be able to separate like because someone not always, but someone usually has to win the match, and someone's going to lose. And you have to know that ahead of time. I think it's really important, especially when I play against people that I'm not friends with and they just like crushed me at a YCS. You have to be able to say, even if it like knocked you out of like top 32, even if it knocked you out of like winning the event, you have to be able to say, okay, that's part of the game. Now let's talk after the match and have like some good fun. I know that I played against one of my friends at the 3v3 Vegas, and he was playing Altergeist, and he just had way more cards that he had available to beat the mirror match, and I totally didn't. And he beat me in a really fun like match, and I think I had gotten a game off of him. And after that, we were still just having a good conversation. We were still friends and stuff. It's really important to separate what happens in the game from like your actual friendships, because someone usually has to win or lose. And unless your opponent like that you thought was your friend like sharked you, I guess maybe that would change things. But other than that, if you're both just playing the game, if you both made metagame reads, if one of you won the coin toss and got to go first and built a huge board,
and I try not to let like games like get in the way of my friendships that I have with friends. I mean, I had this back in the day. If people remember this, like back when Upper Deck Entertainment had that little tiff with Konami, and then they held this event called Upper Deck Day, which was kind of like a glorified regional, but with like a ton more prizes, because they were giving away prize cards as prizes at that point in time. I had this local friend who I perennially beat every single time. I beat him, but we actually faced each other in top 8, and he beat me. Like he beat me cleanly. Like but still, like I'm not gonna let our friendship get in the way. And I had one friend where in a regional where we were both XO in the last round, and again, like we're not gonna let friendships get in the way of us. Like, yeah, it's a competition. Like it's all competition. Like everybody understands that. That's what it is. Like it's a competition. Like, and there are gonna be points where you're gonna have to go against your friends. I've gone against my own best friend and teammate at one regional, and he knocked me out of the tournament. Actually.
Yeah, I think everyone knows like a story where, or maybe experienced it. I know I have, where it's like you go to a regional, there's 500 people, round one you play against someone from your locals, and it's like, or someone in your car, and it's like, how does that happen? But it's just it's part of the game.
Yeah, but that makes sense. That's just the way it is, and I honestly hate having to go against local friends when I'm at like bigger events. Even though if I know that I can beat them, I perennially beat them, I don't want to do that because I want to play somebody new.
Yeah, I mean that's like the appeal, right? I think people when you only play at your locals for so much and you like get used to everyone's like, you know what deck they're playing, you know what tech options they play. There's not so, as you play more and more, there's not as much of a surprise factor. So playing new people at tournaments, I mean, that's like so much fun. You have no clue what they're playing. You have no clue how they play. You have no clue any of that stuff. And you have to come up with all these answers while you're in the
and I think
duel.
that's also really good
exciting
for like a duelist like evolution and development as well, is that being able to play in an unfamiliar environment also helps them be able to adapt, especially when you play like different rogue matches as well. I think that also really helps too, that you can adapt. Like you have to play completely out of your strategy to beat your opponent. Like if you play against like a floodgate deck, you can't play the same way, especially if they go first. You've got to go completely different.
Right. No, that is also, I mean, that's just so exciting because anyone can come up with any sort of deck from like whatever inspiration that they have. It might not be popular, but I mean, you can still at tournaments play against like Inspector, Border, Barrier, Statue, Stun, and the types of things that you need to have to beat those types of decks is going to be a different tool set than your regular matchup. But maybe if you've never played against the deck before, it's like a totally new thing, and it's like, okay, I have to think about the game in a very different way because I'm just trying to play around floodgates now. So what do I commit to the board? What do I not commit to the board? Maybe not the best example because that deck is kind of like a boring floodgate deck, but I don't know. I'm just thinking back to in Portland, I played against, I had taken pretty much all of the like control deck, side deck cards out of my deck because no one was playing control at the UDS. And then I played against like a True Draco player and I had to like come up with some ways to beat him without using like the regular like heavy Storm Duster type cards. And then I played against an actual like Border, Stun, Banisher, Radiance, anti-meta deck, and I had to have this whole new way of thinking about things. Like, how do I beat this deck without the regular cards that people use to play against these types of strategies?
I remember my last regionals, I had to play against like a Border Stun player, and I was playing Orcust. And I think in the final game of our match, I didn't use a single Orcust effect at all, and I won because I had to learn the grind. You have to learn how to grind at that point. So I wasn't just freely throwing away my Harpors into the grave. The Harpors have like the biggest attack out of the trio. So like you want to try to abuse that as much as possible. Like when you have an opening, and those games get whittled down. But I feel extra satisfaction being able to beat those kinds of decks because those decks were meant to take me out. And
yeah, I think that Jeff Jones always would talk about, maybe not always, but I feel like he said before that while playing Chainburn doesn't like make you a good player, playing against Chainburn like really proves like how much you can adapt to like weird situations because that deck just like plays so differently than any deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And like if you commit too much to the board, they just burn you with like Just Desserts and stuff like that or Secret Barrel. So you really have to go about it in like a totally different way. I think there was at the World Championship for 2012, whenever Jarrell Winston went, his opponent was summoning monsters and then using Solemn Warning on his own monsters just so that Jarrell couldn't draw as many cards off of Hope for Escape. Once again, something that would like never come up in any other situation. Like, why would you ever warning your own monsters? But because he was purposely trying to lose life points so that he couldn't get as many draws from, or Jarrell couldn't get as many draws from his trap card. It's like, that's just like a very out of the box way of thinking about things.
And like every time when I play against Chainburn, I try my best not to put Chainlink 1 on the board because that's how they feed. Yeah, because that's how they get their chain strengths to be more effective. That's how they get faster access to accumulated fortune. You want to try to limit as many like Chainlink 1 activations as much as possible. Usually I just try to go like summon and just try to like swing lightly with not my strongest monster, but with my light monster. Like you have to be very patient with Chainburn decks and like know when to go extend and when not to, and when to hold back. And you got to have a lot of restraint playing those kinds of decks.
Yeah, at least they're not around too much anymore.
No, you don't, because
no one really plays
there's
those
so
decks.
much negation now. First turn negations nowadays that Chainburn decks really don't have much of a place anymore. But when you play against those kinds of decks, like you really have to really pinpoint a big weakness in them. Like when you play floodgate decks, like of course there are weaknesses like spell and trap removal, and they try to address that with like something like Starlight Road or whatnot or whatever they have to do. But you really have to exploit weaknesses and really learn how to grind in these games. And I really think that doing that part of the game is what really sets like the good players from the elite players.
Yeah,
But
no,
again, it's so satisfying when I get to beat those kinds of decks, because I often don't play those kinds of decks. But maybe if I play like on the video game or something, I'll play with the fun like lockdown decks just for the heck of it, just to see how they work and at least learn their weaknesses and whatnot.
No, I mean that's true. I think for a while, like True Draco was like the modern equivalent of that, where it's like their deck just played so differently than everyone else, and you had to like really do things in a certain way to beat them. And like sometimes it didn't work out, but a lot of times, like if you played smart, you could actually beat. Like,
the True Draco I find is always a tricky matchup again, because they always like to open up with so many floodgates, and they can open up with like Demise Diagram, which is like I hate that. I hate seeing that because it's so painful.
Yeah, well, at least Demise is at 1 right now, and Diagram is at 1 too, so they never open those.
Yeah, exactly that. But again, like, but when you see it happen, like when Demise was at 3 and Diagram was at 3, it's like, oh, you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. It's like, oh man, this is what I have to like contend with and go through. But when you beat them, it's so satisfying, especially when you can get off or a lightning storm in that sense.
Yeah, no, those cards are great.
Yeah, and you know, it's amazing how we start to see a lot of like power cards, like previous power cards, like just have no power, just not being used anymore. Like Regeki, for instance. Who'd have thought that we would have Regeki at 1 and no one would be using it?
Yeah, Dark Hole's at 3, and like I always forget that. Like I thought it was at like 2 or 1 or something. But yeah, Regeki could I think it could be at 3, and no one would play it. Like it's just, I don't know why. Why would you, like, when you could just play Dark Ruler No More or Lightning Storm, which is basically Regeki, but also it's a
exactly that, because again, like Dark Ruler No More has like a different utility where like it can't be negated by or can't be responded to by monster effects, and it does like a lesser impact than what Regeki does. But we have a format where we get so many monster effects, like when they hit the graveyard, it's like we don't want it to go there yet.
Yeah, and I think that like it's cool having. I think one of the things that's very important for a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! That doesn't have set rotation is to have different options that do similar things, but they're not the same. So, for example, Dark Ruler No More and Forbidden Droplet, they're both pretty similar, but not exactly. Like Forbidden Droplet does have the downside where you have to discard cards, and that can be kind of tricky, but it also has the upside that's a quick play spell, which is cool. And also you can you can actually do damage, and it has the attacks of the opponent's monsters. So I think having 2 cards or more than 2 cards that are similar but different enough is always like good. I mean, back in the day it was Fiendish Chain versus Breakthrough Skill. You know, Fiendish Chain was more susceptible to backer removal, but it also stopped the opponent from attacking. So that's pretty good. But I think giving players, you know, like a couple different options and saying, okay, here's some ways that you can stop a monster effect. Here's some ways that you can break boards, but they're all a little bit different. So you have to actually look at the metagame, say, what do I want? And look at your own deck and say, what do I want? I think that's like what makes deck building so much fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, especially right now when I'm trying to build side decks, it's always like, okay, there's a lot of cards that do similar things like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched and Cosmic Cyclone and now Forbidden Droplet, but you know, which ones do I want to play? Like which board breaking cards, which going second cards do I want? What makes sense for my deck? What makes sense for the metagame? I think that's like, it's hard, but it adds like a dynamic to deck building that I always.
And we're
really
starting to see like a bit of an
Yu-Gi-Oh!
evolution in like how these like board wipe removal cards are coming about. Like for example, Evenly Matched, when that card came out, everyone was like kind of gasping. It's like, oh my god, this is going to kind of change the game when it goes to going second, because you could just wipe out an opponent's board practically with just 1 card and then continue unfettered on your own. And then we get Lightning Storm, which is again the combination of Duster and Regeki. But again, it has that restriction where you can only activate it if you don't have any cards on your field. So it's just kind of funny how like,
yeah, I mean, both those cards are like a good example of how like you have to put them in your deck knowing that if you draw them after turn 1, they're probably unusable or at least difficult to use. And I think that does add like a really interesting dynamic to the game where something, I mean, even like, I mean, Lightning Storm apparently won out because the game is so like turn one focused. But even something like Twin Twisters, like actually a lot of people were still thinking about playing Twin Twisters when Lightning Storm was legal, just because it's more flexible when you draw it after turn one, and that does happen. But I guess Lightning Storm's power level was just so high that it didn't really matter.
Definitely an important factor, because I've also seen like side decking has been completely different now. You barely see a lot of, outside of Floodgate Gix, you barely see a lot of traps get sided in for when you're going second. You usually only want to side them in when you're going first, and you typically side out traps if you know you're going second, because you need to make sure that your opening hand, that every single card is playable and can be contributed immediately. And we're starting to see that as an evolution of the game. Like every card's got to be like ready now. It can't be like a couple turns down the road, because the game's already over at that point in time.
Yeah, and we've seen that. I can't think of any like a bunch of great examples right now, but there certainly are examples of cards that are, I mean, like BOS going to 3 is like an example of a card that is clearly powerful, even by modern standards, but it doesn't do anything turn 1 when you're going first, which is what you want to be doing. So people just don't play it. Dark-Armed Dragon is another example where it went to 3 after the longest time. 0 people are playing it. Although I remain that if we were back in 2018 with that Burning Abyss deck that you were talking about with Hydrolander, that deck actually did play Dark-Armed Dragon at 1 copy, so I think it would probably play maybe 3 of them, maybe 2 of them, I don't really know. But that deck had, I mean, it was different, right? You had graveyard manipulation from the Fairy Tale Snow to get down to 3 dark monsters, then you could pop it on its entire board. But so Dark-Armed and BOS, I mean, they still get played occasionally, but they're not like, I mean, if you would have told someone from 2010 that BOS and Dark-Armed would be at 3 and no one would even consider really playing them in most decks, they would just like not believe you, probably. It'd be impossible. And Dark Holes.
Yeah, because we're starting to see like ban lists now start to open up these cards that were one set, like 1 for the longest time, open them at 3, and then no one's even playing it at 3. It's so weird just kind of being there from the start and seeing the game kind of evolve in that way, where like these power cards are like, we don't care if they're at 3 or not. No one's going to be really using them right now.
Yeah, it seems like the main cards that are still banned are either generic starter cards that are way too powerful, like Pot of Greed, Graceful, Painful Choice, stuff like that. Cards that work with degenerate like combos, like Mind Master and Fishborg Blaster and Mass Driver, or cards that are just like inherently like flawed, things like Vanity's Emptiness or Royal Oppression, stuff that's like way too individually powerful. And like all the rest of the stuff, all like the board breaking cards, it seems like, at least for monsters, they just like don't really care about. And a lot of the cards they brought off the ban list that had like effects that maybe back in the day were above average in power level, but nowadays just no one like cares about. Those things are slowly coming off the ban list.
And we've also seen like cards that have some kind of variant to old ban cards. Like for example, when we see Pot of Greed draw 2, of course that's going to help almost every single deck. And then we look at like a Scratch Engage. It's kind of a variant of it in the sense that you're gonna gain 2 cards off it, assuming you have 3 spells in your grade. And it's kind of funny how like for the longest time, like we had Engage at 3 for a while, and then finally got cut down, and then now it's like outright gone. But it's funny how we get these variant cards that have the kind of like the same power creep, just last in our meta for a little bit until Konami realizes, okay, we've got to axe it, or else it's going to get even more out of hand.
Yeah, because it's not like +1s can't exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, you can have +1s. There are lots of +1s and +2s and +3 in Yu-Gi-Oh! But the thing with Pot of Greed is that it's the only +1 that you can play in every deck that has no downside or setup or cost or anything. It's just a guaranteed +1 every single time you play it in any deck, where something like Engage, while it is extremely powerful and in decks that are playing it, is maybe arguably better than Pot of Greed. It wasn't to the same level of like everyone was playing Engage. Obviously, a lot of people were playing Engage, and it was a very popular engine and a very popular deck, but it wasn't to the level that Pot of Greed has achieved, where like every single deck, every single player would play Pot of Greed right now. I did find though that it is like an interesting debate when you play traditional, because I was going to play in a traditional tournament, and decks that are playing Pot of Extravagance, okay, is it better to have 3 Pot of Extravagance, or is it better to have 1 Pot of Greed and 1 Graceful Charity, or is it better to put all of them in the same deck? Like with Pot of Extravagance restricting you from drawing for the rest of the turn, I mean, it is like a debate. Like, I never thought I'd debate playing Pot of Greed, but because they made a card that obviously is supposed to be used in advanced format where Pot of Greed doesn't exist, it doesn't matter as much. When you're playing traditional, it is kind of like a debate. I didn't actually see what the Guru decks that were being played at Farfetch's traditional tournament, if they actually played Extravagance and Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, but I would be interested in looking at what they decided to go
we don't
with.
really see examples of being able to integrate like the traditional format because we don't really see a whole lot of it. So being able to put like Pot of Greed together with Extravagance, like, now what do you do? Like, do you really want to do that? It almost sounds like a no-brainer when you first think of it, but kind of integrating these two cards together, like you have like Pot of Greed, which is like the quintessential draw card, and then we've had to make like so many different variants of that card that are like kind of as powerful, but they have some sort of restriction on it, and then kind of incorporate them together. It just gets so weird, and you have discussions about like card combinations that you never thought you would ever have to have before, and it's a completely different ball of wax having to deal with this.
Right, and when I was deck building for that tournament, even though like I actually dropped from the tournament because I was so overwhelmed with choice. Like I was trying to build Orcus, and it was difficult finding space for 5 different variants of Orcus, all in the extra deck. Like there's so many different banned cards, there's so many cards, and I think that deck was successful in that tournament because it could take advantage of like so many different banned cards. But yeah, whenever I try to play traditional tournament, I just get way too overwhelmed with like choice. Like there's so many powerful cards, so many FTKs, so many, not even FTKs, just like so many good cards individually and in combination with other cards that it's really hard to deck build. And people say that about like modern Yu-Gi-Oh! They're like, oh, you have to play 3 Ash in every deck. It's so much worse than old school Yu-Gi-Oh! But man, you build those traditional decks and like 20 cards out of your deck are guaranteed when you build your deck. And it's like, okay, good luck finding an archetype to fit in with
that's
the
kind
other
of the
20
curse
spots.
of when you have too many choices because you don't know what to pick, as if being like told what to play or having very few choices, because a decision between 2 different decks rather than like 100 different decks. And that
yeah, and I know that Konami has written in an official article that like one of the reasons that the ban list originally was important was because they found that there was like 23 to 25 cards that were being included in every single deck list, like all the really powerful old school cards. And they said that like it just takes away from deck building. Like you're not really deck building, you're making like 40% of the deck. Everything else is like already
that's
set
kind
in
of like
stone.
what we saw at the tail end of Skystrikers before Engage finally got the axe. Like majority of decks would incorporate some kind of Skystriker engine just to abuse it, because Engage was so good at the time, and you didn't have to play every single Skystriker card. You didn't even have to have a Skystriker monster in your deck just to have it good.
Yeah, I mean, you see like pure Skystrikers, you see True Draco Skystrikers, you see Orcus Skystrikers, you see Warrior Skystrikers. Like Engage was just so powerful, which is why it had to be banned. And
I always found it weird that it didn't get banned as soon as I thought it was, because of how powerful that card is. And even just getting off 1 Engage and getting that extra draw can absolutely turn the tide of an entire match.
Yeah, I really thought it was going to be like Knockouts of Brionic. I thought they were going to put it to semi-limited, and it still would have been really powerful. It still would have done like a lot of damage, but maybe not as overpowered at semi-limited. Like I swear, I thought it was going to be semi-limited on like the very first ban list, like just like Knockouts of Brionic.
I kind of have this criticism with Konami that they don't really restrict their cards right off the bat when they come out. I mean, I remember Upper Deck used to at least do that with certain cards. I think, like for example, Vampire Lord, back in the day, believe it or not, was actually a very powerful card, and I believe they semi-restricted it right off the bat. Macura the Destructor, that card's been banned for so long, but that got banned within the first week. Like Upper Deck had some foresight. Konami, we're seeing it. Okay, once it's released, no matter what the power creep is on that card, we're going to keep it at 3 until we actually see that the meta is starting to like kind of deteriorate a little bit because of that card, and then finally fix it after X amount of formats.
Well, it's because like half the player base is like that, which I think is where I am, which is like, you know, they should hit stuff like earlier so that like the format doesn't get like too bad. But the other half of the player base says like, I mean, you see complaints all over the place. They're not hard to find where it says, oh, I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I buy $1,000 deck and then they ban it 2 weeks later. And it's like, no, they really don't. But so Konami's trying to appease both audiences, and I think it's very difficult. I mean, if you remember at the end, I don't even know what ban list that was. Whatever ban list that Engage got banned, on that ban list, you had like Engage banned, you had Colossus banned, you had Mirage Stallion banned, you had a Harp banned, and like those are like the 4 top decks that for like literal years people were
Yeah.
saying, please hit these, we want more decks. And then, like, as soon as that happened, people were like, yay. And then like a month later, people were like, man, I hate these new decks, why aren't they restricted enough? And it's, I don't know, it's weird. I think Konami has the impossible job. I think all card game companies have the impossible job of banning cards and appeasing everyone, because you're always going to have people that are not satisfied with what you chose.
Absolutely true. I mean, there's such a delicate balance that it's really difficult to iron it out. And you know that you're not going to make everybody happy with every single ban list that happens. I mean, the last one we had no cards banned, and people were criticizing because there were very few changes that happened to it. It was just a couple cards going to 3, and that was about it for the most part. So you're not going to piece everybody in every single ban list, which I understand. And and I'm not trying to bash Konami when I say this, but another possible reason why they have it is because they want to be able to sell their product when these new cards come out.
Well, they're a business, so yeah. I mean, that's what anytime someone says oh, Konami only cares about the profits, it's well, they are. I mean, they're a business. That they have to. If people aren't buying cards, there's no Yu-Gi-Oh for the rest of us to play. I think that where this really came into a lot of people's looking at it in a new way was this last ban list where they just unrestricted 3 cards, and it's there aren't any events going on. So even for online players, while it sucks having to deal with the format, as a company, you can't just. I mean, you could, but how would people feel if they spent all this money to build Eldritch? They spent hundreds of dollars on their Golden Lords. They haven't gotten a chance to play it at any events, and now it's banned before events start up again. I think we are reaching. I mean, that's no discussion for another day, but I think we are reaching a critical mass of cards that shouldn't have existed at the same time, because they probably would have been hit. I don't think that Halki Firebrax plus Numeron plus Dragoon were all supposed to exist at the same time, but because everything is canceled right now, I mean, they are going to exist at the same. I mean, who really knows what would have happened? But those cards, I feel there's so many powerful 1-card starters or 2-card combos where you just with 1 card, if your opponent doesn't have an out to it, they just can't play the game. And it's I don't know if they were all supposed to exist at the same time.
A couple things I want to touch on that is, for one, there have been formats where you can ride a deck for several months or a year, like Sky Strikers, for example. You could have just rode that train for a long time, because strikers were so prevalent at that point in time, so you could really run on it. But there's also the other side of it, where Konami's also made it where you kind of have to invest in the newest deck to be able to keep up at a competitive basis, which shouldn't be that big a deal, because that's how the game is. That's just the nature of what card games are. At least trading card games are anyway. So you can play both sides, but they've put formats where you can ride a deck for so long. Burning Abyss, I think, is probably one of the best examples that you could have. You just have to invest a little bit of card here and there. You have to have some sort of expectancy to invest in some new cards to add your deck.
Let's say I like it when they add one new indirect or direct piece of legacy support to an old deck, and then that deck is suddenly viable at a rogue level. Because I think that I don't know. I mean, there's all different levels of it, but I think that I like it when decks can get their invite at a regional. That's for a lot of people that actually is a pretty big achievement when you're a newer player, trying to get that first invite. I know it's really, really tough. I know a lot of people that watch me have said that they started watching the videos to try to get that first invite, and then they were able to. And it's I just it when decks are able to do that. I know too, a lot of competitive players, that's not that big a deal, but I know for a lot of casual players or newly competitive players, that's the first big hurdle. I mean, making topping a regional or topping a YCS, those are still out of reach. That's for the expert players and the elite players. But for a lot of players, it's oh, maybe I can get my invite. And I think that when a variety of decks can get their invite, which we've seen in the past, I think that's how it's good. Maybe you can't win a YCS with your random deck, but maybe you can get your invite and go to Nats and stuff and go 0-3 and eat pizza. But I mean, that's just, I think that's part of the joy of Yu-Gi-Oh.
In the case that we can get one card that comes out and it completely puts a former deck over the top. For example, when we got Magician's Souls, all of a sudden Spirals became one of the best decks because Master Plan fit the bill of being able to get dumped to the graveyard for Magician Souls, and then not to mention you can dump like your rescues and your assaults to the grave and fuel off it. And it's funny how Magician Souls was meant for Dark Magician, but it was better suited for Spirals than it was for Dark Magicians themselves.
Yeah, but like you said, just that one card was able to take them from nothing to a competitively viable deck. Like once again, for years just not being like in competition at all.
It's kind of funny just seeing that happen, because we know that Spirals, we've seen them at like being one of the best decks of the game. We see them get nerfed, and all of a sudden Magician Souls makes it one of the best decks again. And I took complete advantage of that. I won an OTS championship before the pandemic happened. I think it was like a week or two before it happened, and I think I was the only one, I don't know how, running Spirals at that OTS championship. I'm like, well, gosh, I'm like, I better win this now, or else I'm going to look kind of silly and foolish that I took like one of the best decks of the game and not win with it. Thankfully I did, so I was able to cover my own ground. But it's just kind of funny to see like these indirect cards or anything like that just all of a sudden make one deck just one of the best decks, or at least incredibly viable again.
Right, but I feel you there.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me being kind of nostalgic because I've been in this game since like 2003. But I do enjoy seeing some of the old decks that all of a sudden get a rehash and come back. And it gives me this moment of nostalgia that I'm thinking, it brings me back to the old days where I get to have like maybe 10 turn games.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird for me because like, I know the game's been speeding up, but like as someone that has played Altergeist for so long, my games usually do go pretty long, actually, like a lot of turns at least. So, like I know conceptually that like most matchups aren't like that, but for me, like I really like my games usually do go like to 10 turns, or at least did like when I was playing Altergeist and stuff. So it's weird to think about that. I know that that's not really what's happening for the vast majority of players, but for me, it's always been, because people would like come out of matches with me and say like, man, it was really fun just to like play a lot of turns of Yu-Gi-Oh, like a lot of back and forth. And I'm thinking, well, I do that every match. I don't know what you're talking about, but I mean, my deck like doesn't have a turn one board; it just sets trap cards.
I really enjoy playing a lot of like older formats. Like I play GOAT format, and one of my local friends made these two like really caveman decks. Like they're almost like demo decks, but slightly more improved in a sense that there's a little bit more to play with. And I love playing with those decks because I love grinding those like 10 turn, 15 turn games. And it really kind of keeps me fresh.
Yeah.
I think, in being able to play the grind game, because I think that's, again, going back to this whole start of this conversation, I think that's a very important factor and a skill that what kind of separates the good players from the elite players is that being able to grind and play for more than just 3 turns. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's where like the true fun of Yu-Gi-Oh is, when it's lots of back and forth, no matter who wins. I think it's just fun to have like a lot of cool interactions, a lot of surprise activations. I mean, people love trap cards just because like you don't know what they are until they get flipped up. But I think that the matches where like every single game is back and forth and you both get to like see both of your strategies and see both of your decks and what they can do, I think it's always like some of the more fun
and that's a big reason
tournament.
why I don't play the Pokemon trading card game and why I love Yu-Gi-Oh so much is all the back and forth that you're able to do with your opponent. Like I want to be completely invested into the game. I don't want to just wait for my turn to go and then I can actually do something. I want to be able to do something like the entire way through. And I think that was one of the big reasons why Yu-Gi-Oh has gotten so successful is the player interaction that you're able to do in such a trading card game, because we've had Magic for so long, even though there is interaction with it, but Pokemon, which was also been around for so long, you don't have that interaction. And Yu-Gi-Oh just really brought that to another level in my mind. But I definitely love these. I still love this game, even though that there's a lot less interaction, that we see a lot of like people do these first turn boards. But at least nowadays when I see people build these first turn boards, I can look at my hand and say, all right, this is what they're probably going to end on. And this is going to be my plan to try to grind my way through it at least, because
yeah, I think that like the Megaton promos from last year were like a huge deal for that. I think Dark Glutamore and Nibiru are like excellent cards. Like I think that's great design. Like having these cards are are so anti-combo, but also like with Nibiru, it's not like Max C, because the problem with Max C, I mean, I know a lot of people want it back in the game, but one of the problems with Max C from a design standpoint is that if you go first and make a big board, it just makes it even more difficult for your opponent to break that board. Where with like Nibiru, if you want to stop them from making a board and you went first, well, you have to lose your board as well. Like it's not something that you can really use going first and just keep your board up and whatever. And like Dark Ruler No More, it's like, okay, we'll stun all their monster effects, but if they have spells and traps, we're not going to stop those, which means like they have to have a pretty much just monster effect board, but also like, hey, you have to break it yourself, and we're not going to like let you do any damage. So I think cards like those are really good, and I really do hope. I mean, we have no information on them, but there are world premiere cards in the the 2020 Megatins. I think there's 3 new ones or something. So hopefully those are on like the same level of. I mean, Dimension Shifter is pretty cool too, but I just really hope. I don't think there's any information. No, it just says world premiere. Yeah, 3 brand new world premiere cards, no information. So hopefully they're good though. I think hopefully they're not as bad as the. What set was that? Oh, Dual Overload had a couple new cards, and those ones didn't really do anything. But maybe this will be like somewhere.
I did like the balance of Dark Ruler No More and the fact that you can't inflict battle damage. So like when you're getting close to time, you can't just sit back, let them do the thing, and just play it and then attack for. You have to do it if you've got it in your hand. Like I can't use it, be discard fodder, and also another.
Same thing with evenly matched too. You can't evenly match them and attack them, so they're board breaking cards, but they don't let you
exactly
like OTK.
I kind of like those restrictions where like, okay, my opponent's got this card, then that means like I'm screwed for time because I feel like that's kind of a cheap way to win. In other words, that's it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, winning in time is always like
it is
a tricky thing.
It's a completely different skill set as well because you have to kind of strategically scoop because you want to allot yourself maybe enough time to maybe get a turn off, or let your opponents eat up as much time as possible when you make them go first, and give yourself enough time to just be able to do your turn, get an attack in, and score some life point damage before the time runs out. I mean, that's starting to become a skill in itself. And like I've seen Gabriel Vargas at a regional he won game 1. He looked at the time, didn't want his opponent to make him go first. So what he said was, I'm going to give you the win. And for game 2, and then go right, and then went right into game 3, made his opponent go first, ate up enough time, and then beat him on his subsequent turn. I mean, that's starting to become like strategy in itself too, which is I find is kind of fascinating. I don't like it I don't like the concept of it, but it's a skill that you're going to have to learn now because of the new time rules.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, as much as it sucks, like their time is finite. Like you can't sit there all day. Like there has to be a time limit for games like this that are played in person. So it's like, I wish that the time rule was changed. I wish it was like even if it wasn't like the old 5 turns, even if it was just like 3 turns, or even if it's like finish out your turn, anything but phase. Phase just, I would imagine the next policy doc, I don't know. Konami's kind of weird about changing stuff like that, but I would imagine in the next like 10 years here, it'll get changed to something else, hopefully. But this is just like a new thing they're trying out. I would be
okay with if it was maybe give the opponent 1 more turn, just maybe 1. But I definitely don't agree with the whole phase thing. But again, I have my own little conspiracy theory about it. Yeah. I think most of it's because 1, it stays on time, so that way the judging staff doesn't have to like be around as much. And number 2, not to mention with the whole fiasco that happened with Wizards of the Coast and the judging, they want to be treated as like actual employees and be paid money. And Konami decided to follow that same way as well. It's also another way to save money because because now our judges are being paid by the hour. Which, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a speculation, but obviously I don't have any real evidence behind that. But that possibility is still there. It's hard to ignore. But again, like no evidence on it. This is just my own personal speculation on the matter. But it's funny how you have to play the game completely different again because of the new time rules.
Yeah, no, there was one time when I saw kind of what you're describing, where like a friend of mine was like in the last round for getting his invite, and he had won game 1, and he like was losing game 2, and then he like just didn't scoop. And then like time got called and his opponent won game 2, and it's like, well, it's a draw. I mean, it's over now. So it's like, you really do have to be playing. I know a couple of my friends that just never look at the clock, never are paying attention to it. And they constantly go into time and lose in time. And it's like, you really do got to really focus on the clock.
Yeah, it's another new skill that duelists have to learn if they want to make it in the big times, because time has become more of a factor than ever in this game. And I know people are complaining about it, even myself, I do, but you have to adapt. You got to learn about it, and some people seem to forget that that's a new skill that they have to adapt as well.
Yeah.
All right, Doug. Well, we're approaching our time, man. I had a great conversation with you, man. This is pretty long. This is probably the longest
Yeah, for
podcast
sure.
I'll be putting out here. We're going on about 2 hours, which, hey, I'm not going to complain about, but I had a lot of fun.
Sure.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
man.
for
Is
sure.
there
Thanks for having me
any
on.
shout outs that you want to give out to anybody before we take off?
No, just thanks for having me. I mean, I guess thanks to Sam for I asked him about how his experience was, and he said he had a good time. So I was
Sam
like, okay,
and
I'll do
I
it.
love that guy, man. And I know I mention this all the time, but he and I went to Bo Tang's wedding together, and we just ate so much hors d'oeuvres together. We were at the same table. We drank a whole bunch, man. Sam's a hoot to be around in person.
Yeah,
He
he's
is.
a partier. He's fun.
I will confirm that whatever personality he has online, that's him in real life. And I love that he's legit.
Yep. Yeah,
he's
exactly.
full of it. So big shout out again to Sam. Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did a little bit of research on your end to see what was going on with my podcast before you came on.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I mean, I get a lot of requests and stuff, so it's not that I'm not that popular, but I mean, certainly people always are asking bigger channels to do stuff. But I really like your
appreciate
style,
you
so I want to come on.
And I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. I'm hoping this will get big eventually, but I gotta put in the effort, and only time will tell if it gets big. But I'm hoping so. I mean, I've got a gimmick that no one else has. I'm the only journalist that actually runs a podcast, so a Yu-Gi-Oh podcast, rather. Yeah, gotta start somewhere.
So I think you're on a good
If you're
track
listening
right now.
out there, this is Doug Zeeff. Don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel, dzeeff, spelled DZEEFF. He's also on Twitter by the same name. And don't forget to check out his articles on TCGPlayer.com. And just a note, I'm actually in talks with Jason right now to get this podcast affiliated with TCGPlayer, so you could be seeing me on there very soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For more information, check out the Gate Expectations podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, and Spotify.